It is altogether too easy for manipulative marketing and clever con artistry to turn a culture inside out. Observing the annual recognition of U.S. independence devolving into a putrid hedonistic display of vulgarian bacchanalia is informative. From homemade hillbilly explosions to the mindless inertia of dragging phone-addled children to an overcrowded seashore to retail blowout sales. Little wonder remains as to why we are watching the sunset of human liberty. For honestly, how can you possibly bear the cross of liberty when you are fat, drunk, and stupid? Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to share this episode. I need you to share these words. I need you to engage your life and your resources in the preservation of the concept of human liberty. If you don't stand now, you won't have legs on which to stand tomorrow. Funny thing about history, we tend to view it as a thing that happened rather than what it is, a thing that is happening. You are not detached from history. You are part of it, and you will be judged by your actions or lack thereof. Remember these words. Quote, "The righteous didn't suddenly become righteous. They just refused to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity." End quote. The time has come for you to disengage from your idle time fillers and lift your eyes to the task of illuminating the path of liberty. Make this Independence Day your historical marker for when you rededicated yourself to something greater than the pursuit of triviality. Independence Day does not belong to the United States because liberty isn't a commodity. The significance of Independence Day belongs to everyone. And with that charge, I give you the following. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson. The shy and circumspect Virginia delegate to the Second Continental Congress penned these words shortly after the first shots of revolution were fired at Lexington. Jefferson was known as an awkward, even ungifted orator, but his written words would alter the course of human history. The long train of abuses which spurred the growing move for independence from the British Crown included a series of parliamentary acts designed to crush the economic and personal freedom growing in the colonies. Taxation, confiscation, monopolizing trade, forced quartering of British soldiers in private homes, all generated by a tyrannical monarchy an ocean away, leaving the people without hope of representation or even recognition of pleas for redress of grievances. Inspired by the Enlightenment movement in Europe and the philosophy of writers like Locke and Montesquieu, and back 1,500-odd years to Marcus Aurelius, colonial leaders set forth to dissolve the existing political bands tethering them to the British Crown. The result was the greatest collection of avowed philosophy the world has ever known. The Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4th, dispatched to assemblies, conventions, and continental troop commanders on July 5th, signed and filed in Philadelphia on August 2nd, 1776, and the United States Constitution, ratified on June 21st, 1788, stated and delineated the self-evident truth indelibly carried in the heart of mankind. By birth, you are free, and no government may alter that. how incredibly dangerous that truth is to you, because its foundational undeniability represents the greatest existential threat to those who aspire to control you. Marxist, Fabian, socialist, communist, oligarchs, mercantilist, corporatist, religious orthodoxy, the global energy and industrial complex. None of these entities can survive and dominate if you understand, embrace, embody, and defend that baseline truth. And the threat of your understanding of human liberty represents existential peril for centralized power. Say these two words: I am. That simple statement is the only declaration you need to make to take your place as equal among all mankind. Everything else is nonsense misdirection designed to keep you confused, placated, and fearful. If you're busy shouting, I am not, well, then you have already voluntarily surrendered. If you're too prodigiously stupid to see this, then good luck to you. And I hope you take comfort in your bread and circuses. If you refuse to get this, then you are engaged in a whirling vortex of cognitive dissonance on a level rarely seen over the course of humanity. You are lying to yourself and denying universal truth because you are an ignorant coward. In other words, you're the defund the police protest that submitted a formal written request for police protection and then screamed at police officers for being there while they explained that your crowd requested that they be there. That's the most millennial thing I've ever heard and explains a great deal of the collapse of reason and sanity. You want to know what the world looks like? When you erode the cognitive ability of a generation by jamming smartphones in their cribs and strollers and inculcate them with persistent and calculated counterfactual misinformation? It looks like a kindergarten lunchroom on soup day after the lunch ladies intentionally pass out forks. All the kiddies' faces turn purple with rage and anger because they don't possess the analytical lucidity to reason through rudimentary problem solving. Honestly, my cat can figure out how to open a door, but these nut huggers can't grasp the excruciating irony of burning down an Apple store to demonstrate rage against privilege and filming it with their iPhones. Anyway, forgive my tangential digression. Back to the message at hand. Years ago on this day, I wrote something about remembering the significance of July 4th, why we recognize it, and how it saddens me that it has become so carefully scrubbed from the collective consciousness as a critically generative pivot point in human history and replaced as a simple date on the calendar that acts as a siren call signifier to begin a simultaneous rampage of small explosions, water activities, and consumerism. How delightful. In what should have been my first clue, the camel's nose in the tent, as it were, into the skulking disassembly and reconstruction of history, a friend of mine scoffed at my view of the Declaration of Independence as one of mankind's most important documents. This saddened me, yet began to awaken me to the flawed reasoning of a broad swath of people that the founding of what would become the United States of America was based on a series of carefully isolated snapshots analyzed through the prism of time by modern standards and sensibilities. This is simply a far too convenient and intellectually myopic method to place thousands of years of unfolding human history into a very limited narrative. Regarding my friend, there isn't a fiber of me that suspects ill intentions on their part. In fact, this is one of the most genuinely loving and caring people I know. The problem is our willingness to allow this moment's emotion, whatever the exponentially escalating drama du jour, to overshadow an epic tale of struggle. The tale of independence doesn't belong to one group or one nation state. Remember, by your birth you are free. Liberty isn't a commodity able to be possessed and traded. The tale of independence began with the dawn of mankind, not with Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Adams et al. This nation didn't pop into existence from the ether in 1776. Colonization began nearly 200 years before on this continent. It is not the 5,000-year history of royal domination, slavery, oppression, and constant conflict from Asia to Mesopotamia to Babylon to Africa to Europe. It's not the Egyptians, Etruscans, Greeks, Romans, Macedonians, Gauls, Visigoths, or Huns. It isn't empire, expansion, collapse, 1,000 years of darkness, awakening, Renaissance, and Enlightenment. It's none of that. It is about the awakening that began after all of that. It is about the growth of spirit that led a group of people to stand up against a status quo of oppression into which they were born and toss it away. It is about the courage to reject the ideals and practices they inherited, declare them immoral, and set a new course for humanity based on one very simple principle. By your birth, you are free. Liberty is also very much about the people who have fought from that day 244 years ago to today and beyond the visible horizon. Not for a flag, or lines on a map, or dirt, or even for those parchments, but for the concept, the unalienable universal truth that by your birth you are free. Freedom isn't owned, people. Freedom is. And it is far too nouveau convenient and even childish to believe that a small group of people fighting thousands of years of history and global oppression could flip a switch and change the world overnight. That is a tragic and fundamental misunderstanding of the philosophy of liberty by grace of birth and the people who were born into a society framed by privileged control. Their lifetime did not see the end of bondage as an accepted norm, but by God, they crafted the only documents ever put into writing stating the guarantee of fundamental liberty and make that philosophy the basis of law. They built the framework to dismantle a system guided by the whims of royal fiat and create a system based on human liberty embossed into law guided by that simple principle. The unfolding of this story has been ugly, but that is because of the actions of man, not because of the documents or the spirit that wrote them. The documents state the guarantee of the birthright of liberty. They do not guarantee the infallibility of man. Much as the light of God is carried in the souls of flawed and failing man, the pure, uncontaminated water of liberty is forever to be carried in a rusty and decayed bucket by the hands of people who may not fully understand its power. America is an idea, not borders, resources, traditions, or even people. Those all change with time. The idea of liberty should not. That's enough to ponder for now. Once again, I charge you with the mission of upholding human decency, a concept which is being torn asunder by evil incarnate and their useful idiots. An awful lot of very misled people are using the platform of freedom to burn it down under their very own feet. Today, you will see and hear the attempts of the minions of terror to twist the wisdom of words they've never read into unrecognizable lies. Be aware, be mindful, understand what is happening. An army of hate and deceit is being unleashed. Stay frosty. Wolves, sheep, sheepdogs, and turd weasels, ladies and gentlemen. Watch your six. Here's the Thing can be found on the Podbean app. Here's the Thing at podbean.com, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and lots of other places in the podcast universe. I'm asking you from my heart to not only share this episode and this podcast, but to become a patron and donate to the cause of liberty by following the show link to patron.podbean.com/here's a thing, or clicking the little $sign or the Become a Patron button on the Here's a Thing episode page of your Podbean app. Give what you can and share the word. And by the way, thanks Mel Z for the gentle reminder of responsibility. Go get after it 100% or don't pretend to care, because how you do anything is how you do everything, and you owe that debt to the precept of honor. And there are many things you can be today. Before all else, be authentic. It'll pay off. This concludes today's programming. Please resume your Independence Day on July 4th, 2020.